Hello and welcome to this British Rowing workout. My name's Matt Gleed, I'm one of the British Rowing Master Trainers, and today I'm going to take you through a mobility focused workout. We're going to take you through 10 of my top exercises to help improve your mobility for a better athletic conditioning, and then I've also got a little bonus exercise at the end which will really help you in preparing before you get onto your ergs, your rowers, or getting out onto the water and starting to really compete as well. So follow along this real-time workout. We're going to be working with movement and we're going to focus on mobility of the joints and a little bit of activation in the muscles as well. So join me in these top 10 exercises. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start off at the end of the mat. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to tilt forwards from my hips, starting to feel a little bit of stretch down the hamstrings. I'm going to slowly tilt my body forwards and reach down towards the floor. If you need to, have a slight bend in your knees just to allow you to get into this deep position, and then come into an upward facing dog. From here, we're going to walk your hands all the way back up into a downward facing dog and then control yourself. And I'm going to roll up through each vertebrae of my spine before I stand tall again. Let's repeat this. So hinging from the hips, leaning forwards, starting to feel that stretch down the back of my legs as I walk my hands forwards into an up dog position where I start to feel a nice stretch through the front of my hips. Now slowly push your hips back up, walk your hands back towards your feet, and then start to roll up the spine each vertebrae at a time and reset the shoulders at the top. Let's do it one last time. Hinge forwards from the hips, feel that little stretch through the back of the legs. Start to walk your hands forwards into that upward facing dog movement, eyes looking high towards where the ceiling and the walls meet, and then again push the hips high, working a little bit of shoulder mobility, and then this time as you walk your hands back, roll up through the spine one last time, and then at the very top we're doing a big shoulder rotation as well. Now this time we're going to roll down the spine, bring your chin towards the chest, slowly rolling down the whole body, each vertebra at a time, hands rolling down the shins, and then walk your hands forwards. And this time in the upward facing dog position, I'm just going to get you to rest your knees onto the floor, place your feet turned out, and then just lift your hips up again. Now just have a little bit of a rock side to side, have a little bit of a rotation. We're just starting to try to activate the muscles around the hips, and also just start to create a little bit of stability around the hip joint. As I place my knees back down the floor, I tuck my toes underneath, and then this time we're going to go into a downward facing dog where you look towards your toes and just hold your position there. Now as this is the first downward facing dog where we're holding the position, just walk your heels. This is referred to as walking the dog. Just starting to feel like you're stretching through the Achilles tendons, working up through the calves and just feeling the back of the legs starting to stretch a little bit more. Let's come back into that upward facing dog position. And again, I'm going to rest my knees onto the floor, turn my feet away, and then bring my knees back off the floor and just hold myself in this suspended position, trying to keep my shoulders away from my ears. And then rest the knees back down, tuck the toes under. Let's go back to downward facing dog. Eyes create a laser-like line all the way down from your hands all the way to your feet. Now think about pushing your hips up high and thinking about lowering your heels towards the floor. Now for some of you, your heels may be on the floor, which is absolutely great, but if not, just start to work into this position. Let's do it one last time. Come forwards into that outward facing dog, resting your knees onto the floor, turn the feet away, suspend the hips up. Now the reason why I quite like to hold this suspended position, just to allow the weight of your hips just to start to stretch through the upper back and the lower back at the same time. Let's rest your knees back down, tuck the toes under. Last time, push into that downward facing dog position. Now again, holding here, but I want you to make this an active position. So think about lifting your hips up high, heels coming down towards the floor, and find it quite a working position so you can really start to generate that little bit of stretch reflex through the back of the legs. Now this time I want you to lift one leg up and I want you to lift that foot up towards your hand. And once you've got your foot next to your hand, what I'm going to ask you to do is to take that hand off the floor and I'm going to get you to rotate away from the rest of the body. So I've got my hand up reaching high towards the ceiling. I'm going to push my back heel away and then bring the hand down inside the foot. Let's step back to downward facing dog and alternate that to the opposite side. So again, the foot comes up towards the hand, and if it doesn't quite reach there, physically move the hand a little bit more if you can. Reach your hand up high, push the back heel away, see if you can straighten through that back leg, and then bring that hand down inside the foot again. Come back to downward facing dog. And we're going to repeat this just a couple more times on each side, just so we can start to work into this big range of movement through the hips, reaching that hand high. Now the key thing here is to think about pushing your back heel away. So you really start to open up through the body, opening up through the hip. Now place your hand back on the inside of the foot, step back to downward facing dog, and then again over to your opposite side. And again, it feels absolutely great to get into these big ranges of movement. But if your range is a little bit smaller, then that's absolutely fine. Just start to work on your positioning, start to build into that stretch, and start to find the work that is right for you. One more time on each side, reaching through the fingertips now, stretching high, pushing the back heel away from the rest of the body. If you find yourself a particularly little bit of tightness in any part of the body, just start to take a moment, work into that position, breathe in and out. Try to maintain that breathing all the time so you can really start to work. If you get a little bit stuck into a position, find the breath to ease out the tension. Now again, on this one, what we're going to do is bring the foot back into that downward facing dog. Now this time, we're going to lift that foot up. I'm going to swing the foot to the opposite hand. And I'm going to rest my foot down. Now in some positions, this can be called pigeon or a swan pose. What we're going to do is we're going to use the hands and we're going to place them onto your foot and onto your knee or thigh. You're just going to bring yourself into a slightly more extended position. Now, there's a few variations of this. If you wanted to, you could start to walk your hands up your legs a little bit more. And if you wanted to, again, extend your arms up high, it's just so we start to feel that work being done up through the spine as well. Place your hands back onto the floor, tuck the back foot under, step back to downward facing dog, and we'll take it over to the opposite side. So the foot swings through to the opposite side hand. And then again, you've got the options to walk yourself into a position which you feel comfortable. If you want to come a little bit taller, extending your arms up high and bring those hands back down. Now take your time into these positions. If you find that you want to work through some of these progressions, that's absolutely fine. It's not about the end range position. It's often just about trying to get yourself into a position where you feel the stretch. So if you're a little bit tighter, you might like to just bring yourself a little bit lower and just feel how that relationship works onto your hip. Now the goal in this movement is to start to open up through the hip a little bit more. And you'll find that when you go into these sort of positions, it really is great for hip mobility, but also the flexion and extension of the spine. And just developing the mobility around a lot of the key joints that we work when we start to row, but also in other sports as well. So as you start to cross-train and work on your weaknesses, this can be a great mobility work to do just maybe as a warm-up or as a cool-down. I'm a big fan of working on mobility as opposed to just holding static stretches. I find that working into a good mobile position and then developing the stretch at any of these positions can make it very, very comfortable and start to develop more athletic performance as well. So have a go at putting these in as a warm-up or as a cool-down drill before you get onto the water or get onto your erg. And you can really then start to build in some of these movements as almost like a routine that you're going to work on to develop that athletic performance as well. Okay, now from here we're going to rest your knees down onto the floor. Slowly bring yourself back round to the front here. Now one of the things we're going to have a look at here is a bottom-up squat. So this one is looking at a deep position. First of all, we're going to get you down into a position where your feet are comfortable on the floor. Now if you want to stand up and then come down into this position, that's absolutely fine. I want you to find a foot position that feels comfortable. Now your goal is to get as low as you can, but at the same time feel like this is a comfortable position if you can. Now for some of you, you'll be in a very deep position where your hips are going to be just off the floor. For some of you, you might be a little bit taller. It really does depend on your range of movement in the ankles, the amount of flexion that feels comfortable to you in your knees and also in your hips. But what I want you to do is I want you just to move from side to side and spend plenty of time just adjusting the feet into a position that feels the best for you. Now there is no one size that fits all in terms of where your feet should be when you squat. It should be based on how your biomechanics and your comfort level feels. Now even just staying down in this position can be very challenging for some people. So go to whichever depth feels most comfortable for you. And you can see what I'm doing is just putting my elbows on the inside of my thighs, and as I rock forwards and backwards and side to side. I'm just trying to find the stability of the feet, and I was just getting used to that deep flexed position of the hips, the knees, and also into that deep low position on the ankles as well. Now from here, what I want you to do is I want you to stand up with your back as straight as possible. So think about rolling your shoulders back. You might bring yourself a little bit higher. I'm going to use my arms as levers to push against my legs and then bring yourself up to a standing position again. Okay, now just loosen the legs out. Let's do this a couple more times together. So again, find a comfortable position. Trying to keep your back nice and straight. Lower yourself down, my arms reaching on the inside of my thighs, and then a little bit of movement side to side. A little bit of movement forwards and back, making those little adjustments on your feet. It should feel like it's a challenging range of movement, or you're going to find yourself the most comfortable position to be in when you're down there. Try to straighten through your spine, using your arms to push out wide, and then stand up tall. Good. Loosen out a little bit more. Let's do it one more time together. Taking that deep position, lower yourself down. Arms reach on the inside of your thighs, side to side movement. This can sometimes get referred to as scrubbing your hips. And then a little bit of movement forwards and backwards just to find where that extension and flexion really starts to orientate from. Now push your arms wide so you still feel like you're stealing a little bit of stability from the legs. Straighten through the spine, shoulder blades back and down. One last time, we're going to stand up together. 3, 2, 1, stand tall. Good, excellent. Okay, now we should feel like the hips have got a different relationship now with the rest of the body. It should feel like you've worked and challenged that range of movement. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add a little bit more upper body flexibility to this as well, and we're going to look at the extension of the spine. So we'll go down to that bottom up squat, and what we're going to do is in this deep position, we're now going to reach your arm up high, and each time we're going into this wide, and we're going to stand into an overhead squat. So standing tall in these positions can really be good for work on this mobility as well. Let's go down again, straight spine if we can. Reach the arms on the inside of your thighs, down into that deep position, pushing against your thighs. And then from here, arm comes high, work on the shoulder mobility. Now imagine you're holding a dowel or a bar above your head. Try and keep your arms back and then stand tall. Good, let's do it again. Loosen up your hips if you feel like you need to at the top. And if not, straighten through the spine, shoulder blades back and down. Reach the arms through the inside of your thighs, down into this deep position. And then again, we're going to reach the arms up. Now try to work on that shoulder mobility. Imagine you had a heavy bar over the top of your head, making sure the shoulders are back as far as they can, and then stand tall. Good, and just loosen it up a little bit. Now we started to work deep into these hips. Let's start to challenge that hip range a little bit more. Let's come down into the floor, and I'm going to place my hands onto the floor. Now what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to bring my weight onto the forefoot of my foot, and then from here, we're going to pivot on one forefoot and reach across. These are called kick sits. And again, when you bring yourself up, use your arms, pivot on one forefoot, and then pivot over to the opposite side. Now, these are full kick sits where the goal is to try and keep both hands on the floor. But if you don't have the mobility through the spine, then one of the things that you can do is you can start to bring that arm off and bring it down to the opposite side. So check out my foot as you see it pass through. And then it pivots over to the opposite side and I reach my hand off. Now by taking that hand off the floor, it just allows a little bit more range of movement to come over the top, which takes a little bit of stress away from the mobility as well. So as we start to rotate round from one side to the other, we're going to sit down onto the floor and just pause for a second, reset the spine, come back into the center, over to the opposite side. So again, this is a great mobility movement, not only for the hips, but you're also creating this movement through your thoracic spine. Now, coming into this position, if you can keep both hands on the floor, it does start to work you a little bit more. So try to keep the hands down into the floor, and you start to really then work as you pivot from side to side, reaching across your body. Let's do this last time, and back to the center. Great job. Now the next movement we're going to have a look at is going to go into a kneeling position. Now this is where we're going to use a resistance band or potentially a towel if you've got one as well. So I've got a band here, which is in one big loop, and I'm going to take the band into quite a wide position. Now one of the benefits of using a resistance band is it gives a little bit more stretch so you can start to maneuver a little bit more. But your goal here is to do a bit of what we call shoulder mobility work, and we're working into something called a halo. So I'm going to start off with taking the arms all the way over and behind me. So going from mid-thigh all the way over to the bottom of the back, and then repeating that. And we're just looking to stretch the band or put a little bit more tension onto the towel as you start to move in and out of these positions. Now again, a great way to start to prepare the shoulders is doing these movements, but we can also then start to create circles, moving around as far as you can behind the body and then across to the opposite side. And we're trying to create as much mobility through the body as you can around the shoulders. Now, one of the reasons why I like doing these into a kneeling position is because it keeps my hips very stable. I often see when people do this into a standing up position, let's go around the opposite direction, what they start to do is they start to adjust and shift their weight in their hips a little bit more. And that can be a really big sign on the way that people are starting to maneuver their bodies around what they're really trying to achieve. So the goal here is shoulder mobility and a little bit of stability around the muscles of the shoulder, as opposed to starting to get you into a position of success, but you've almost cheated your way into it as well. Okay, so that is your shoulder halos. The next position we're going to have a look at is a back up to a standing position. And what I'm going to ask you to do here is I'm going to get your feet facing forwards, and I'm going to ask you to step one foot in front of the other to create almost like a T shape. Now this T shape that you're going to create starts to work in something called internal rotation of the hips. So a lot of the work that we're going to be doing in rowing is going to be working in flexion and extension, and there's a large amount of internal and external rotation into this one. So I'm now just starting to use my arms as a driving force to transfer a little bit of momentum to allow me to get into that internal rotation. And my feet, each time my foot steps in front, it creates that T shape and then back round again. Now if I close my arms together, I can create a little bit more force as I rotate round. And the goal here is just to, each time you step into that T, just make sure, have a little check in with your foot that you are creating that T. I don't want you rotating too far around, but the goal is to create a T with both feet. Okay, let's swap it over to the opposite side. Again, just reset yourself. Step into the position to begin with, and you might start to feel like the hip feels a little bit tight to begin with. But then as you start to step in and out of that position, starting to work on that mobility of the joint, you're then able to create a little bit of momentum with the arms. Your body will start to learn this new movement pattern and start to challenge the weaknesses that potentially you've got in your athletic ability as well. Just bring your hands together, start to rotate around a little bit more. And again, every time that you step into this position, start to feel that you're working on that internal rotation of the hip, and just check in that the shape that you're making is that T again, not overstepping where you're going to put pressure onto the knee, but not under rotating where you're not really getting into that internal rotation as well. Last one then. Good, and then just loosen your body up. Now one of the classic mobility moves is going to be something called a hip circle. So for this one, you place your hands onto your hips, take your feet into a comfortable distance apart, and wherever they feel comfortable in terms of facing forwards or turned out slightly. And what you're looking to do is to create a large circle, creating that mobility. Now when you're doing this one, a lot of people start to feel like it's a bit of an awkward exercise, and they often start to bend their knees a little bit more. So really start to create the biggest circle that you can. And you might feel a few clunks and clicks into your hips as well. And that's completely normal. You're just trying to work on that mobility and just start to find where it feels a little bit stiff, sticky, clicky, any way that you describe it, just looking for you to work on that mobility. And particularly during a period of time where you're sat down for long periods of time, you can often get a little bit stiff in the hips and in your lower back. So creating this mobility through these circles is a great way just to challenge and to rejuvenate the joints and create this beautiful fluid called synovial fluid around the joints, which helps create a better range of movement because your whole joint capsule feels better from it as well. Okay, loosen up there. So they are my top 10 exercises, but I've got a bonus one for you as well. Now this is a drill which you can create a bit of a combination of a lot of the moves that we've done together. So this bonus exercise is called a 360-degree bubble drill. Now the purpose of this is to imagine that you are in a bubble and you're going to create mobility by touching every single part of the outside of the bubble as well. So when you go into this position, you can move your feet if you want to, but what you're looking to do is to reach and to create this big circle throughout the whole of the body. So in whichever angle you feel like you're comfortable in, I want you to literally reach in 360 degrees and move around as if you're touching every single furthest point that you can. And you could even then start to place different anchor points onto the floor to create these big circles, reaching as far as you can. So just spend a little bit of time here, starting to maneuver the body, starting to feel what it's like to challenge you. And you can pivot your feet, you can adjust putting hands, feet, you can even start to reach with your foot and to create large circles. And what we're looking to do really is to create freedom and movement and to start to challenge where your body might be reaching and feeling like it's a little bit stiff as well. So if you can create this bubble drill and just spend a few minutes reaching into all of these different positions, you can really start to find what it's like to start to challenge yourself in different positions and to create as much deep mobility as you can. And it's a really nice way, once you finish this drill, that you start to find ways that you can start to maneuver and travel and really explore what your body can and can't do. And then you can start to take some of the drills that we've done today and work on some of these weaknesses or some of these points where you could be a little bit stiff and challenged in your range of movement as well. Okay, now bring yourself back to the center when you're ready, and then slowly roll up or stand up to a tall position again. Thank you very much for joining me for this British rowing workout. I hope you enjoy this mobility workout. Take some of these drills, put them in as a warm-up or as a cool-down, or even just part of your conditioning workout before you go and do your strength training as well. We look forward to seeing you on more videos soon. Thanks for joining us.